Hello, company, and welcome to Show People, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the UK performing arts industry and those dedicated to their craft, covering the latest news and issues, what to see and do, showcasing theatrical talent, and of course, always trying to inform, educate, and entertain. My name is Andrew Keats. I'm a director and your host. Now, today's guest, well, he's a bit of a Heinz 57. He's been an actor who's appeared on stage, in films and TV, a drag queen, a pub landlord, a marketing manager, and is currently the Chief Operating Officer and Agent at Simon & Howe Associates, whilst teaching, producing, and generally being awesome for actors. Please welcome Josh Boyd-Rochford! Welcome to the show!
Hello, Andrew.
It's lovely to have you here on this hot, sweaty day.
It's very hot, but that's a great intro. Thank you for that. It makes me sound really like I know what I'm doing.
It is the Show People podcast. Ladles and Jelly Spoons. We will be talking to Josh about the trials and tribulations of being an agent and posing your questions that you, the listeners, have been asking on social media. I'll be getting my theatrical tips out of things to do this August 2018. And on the platform, we have a song from The Wicker Husband by Darren Clark and Rhys Jennings. And of course, I'll be talking to Josh Boyd-Rochford all about his life, career, and setting him some infamous Show People podcast challenges too. You are listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats and Josh Boyd-Rochford! Hello, mate. Welcome to the show. You're still reeling from your introduction.
I am, actually, a little bit. Yeah.
So
You've done your research.
I have been doing my research. I've found out all sorts about you, Josh Boyd-Rochford. I'm going to start off by saying I am absolutely in love with your new mailing list. Now, I know I've been very effusive, and those who follow me on Twitter knows that every other day I'm going, have you read Josh's mailing list? Josh, just let our listeners know about your website and the mailing list and what it does for theatre makers and how they can enjoy it.
I think it's more what it does for me, Andrew. I get a lot of emails and texts and comments on it saying, you wrote this for me, didn't you? And this is about me. And actually, it's all about me. It is all about me. I write it all for myself, and I wish that I could take my own advice. But what it was I just wanted to build a community, because when I left drama school, I felt very alone. Mm-hmm. I felt that I had no support. I'd been at this place for a year studying with these incredible people all day, every day. And then I came out into the industry and there was nothing. There was no support. I never heard from my agent. I never spoke to them. And you just don't know what's happening. And also, I think a lot of what I learned at drama school was irrelevant in the real world. And when I became an agent, Con O'Neill said to me, be the agent that hates the industry, not actors. Yeah. And so when I became an agent, and I did that quite suddenly, I literally was like, one day I said, right, I don't want to act anymore. And then 2 days later, I was an agent. I decided I wanted to be the type of agent that I would have wanted when I was first coming out. And the way I built that was through communication with my clients, regular communication. So for the last 4.5 years, I've been sending my poor clients who must hate me 2 emails a week, 2 newsletters a week, which basically versions of a blog or ideas about what the industry is looking for or what's happening in the industry at the moment. And somebody said to me, this is great, but it's only going to your 60 clients. You need to take this to more people. And so I decided to start putting those blogs onto the website and so on. And then I just created what I call
the royal we,
what I call the Weekly Digest, which is just a kind of rundown of stories that have appeared on the website that week, which covers theatre news that I'm interested in. I don't pretend that I'm a news site and I'm covering everything. It's stuff that interests me. And my blogs and ideas about it. And then I kind of expanded that a little bit because I'm fascinated by creativity. And one of the things that worries me is that actors very often feel like they don't know how to be creative if they're not acting. And just ideas, cheap ideas. I want to keep everything cheap. Cheap ideas for how to kind of kickstart your creativity and feel like a creative person, even if you're spritzing people in Harrods or working at RSVP, you can still feel like an actor. And because acting is not who you are, it's something that you do. And I just wanted to give people sort of creativity hacks that they can try every day to kind of just get those juices flowing again, that are not anything to do with acting. It's not like read a play or go to a Q&A with a casting director. They're stupid little things, like, and they're all sort of meditative as well, because I think that's really important. So things like just take a walk and pick some flowers and create yourself a really cheap budget bouquet that'll brighten your room for a couple of days. It's just silly little stuff like that. And I launched that about 4 weeks ago, and it's got over 200 subscribers already now. And the pressure, Andrew, the pressure of it each week is terrifying now.
How can people subscribe to it, Josh?
A pop-up appears whenever you log on to the website. So there is a sign-up page on the website, but anytime you're reading a page on my website, a pop-up will appear asking you to sign up, and you just put in your first name and your email address, and it's that simple. And it's just once a week. I'm not sending out emails every
Daily.
single day, because I'm still, I don't know what GDPR actually accomplished, but I don't seem to have been taken off any of those lists. No. I'm still receiving emails about boxing classes that I signed up to like 20 years ago. So it is just once a week. It generally goes out on a Sunday afternoon, and that's it. Once a week you hear from me with about a sort of mini blog, a couple of recommendations of things that I've been listening to or reading, some opportunities. I try and source some paid opportunities and unpaid opportunities, because I still think unpaid work is important.
So what is the address of your website so people can go and sign up?
jbragent.com.
Everybody subscribe, and if you don't, you are losing out on a really fabulous free resource. And I'm sure there'll be a reciprocal link to the Show People podcast in the next mail.
Absolutely,
there should be. So anyway, I'm going to move on to some questions that we found in from social media about agents, as well as some questions that I've also got. Now, I've had this question about 3 or 4 times, and all of which every single person has asked to remain anonymous. And I'm sure you can guess what the question is.
I'm married. Yeah.
We'll be hearing from your husband later. So the most common question that's come up: I am thinking about leaving my agent. What is the protocol and how should I do it?
Again, I can only answer this from my experience. So please, and I always say advice is only worth the coffee that you had to pay for to hear it.
As you drinking tap water at the moment.
And I'm drinking tap water. That's how valuable my advice is. I think what I would say, if you are thinking of leaving your agent, is please try and remember your agent is a person. Mm. A friend of mine who's a top agent at a top agency, I rang and said, I'm devastated. One of my clients has left. And she said, they come, they go. Who called? And that kind of brought it back to me that there's no shortage of actors. Mm. But as an agent, I tend to work very closely and very personally with my clients. And it's devastating when somebody leaves me. The first time it happened, I cried. I had to leave the office and go outside and sob for a bit. It's got easier. There are still times when I kind of think, why? And I do try and understand why. Some people say, oh, should I phone? Should I email? I would prefer to hear the news via email, simply because it will give me time to process. If you call me and say you're leaving me, you're going to somebody else, my reaction will be instantaneous. And I try very hard not to give instantaneous reactions to anything anymore. I've learned that lesson. But my reaction may well be instantaneous. And that is not how I would like our relationship to progress after that. Because just because you leave me does not mean I'm not still invested in your career and in you as a person. So I would prefer to hear the news via email. And I think that the main thing to do is to acknowledge that you understand that your agent has worked hard for you. We do understand, as agents, that it doesn't always work. It doesn't click with every client. And I've had some amazingly talented clients that I've had to let go of simply because I can't get them in the room. And at the beginning, I really did take that on myself. And I was thinking, God, I can't get these people in the room. I'm a bad agent. And as I've progressed in agenting, I've kind of gone, well, not only can I get people in the room, but I've got people in that show. So there's something not right here about the connection here. And that's when I've had to let people go, because I can't do anything for them. And I really do think they should be with somebody that can do something for them. When people come over to me, they very often say there was no communication with my agent, and I would be devastated if a client left me because they felt that there was no communication with me, that they couldn't pick up the phone and talk to me about problems. And I think most clients that have left me have left for bigger agencies. They've gone to Curtis Brown or to Hamilton Hodel or to Intertalent, and they've left, in the words of one client, at this very specific point in my career, this agency can offer me something very specific that you, at the point in your career that you're at, you can't. And that, I think, is a wonderful way of leaving, because I understand that actors need to progress their own careers as well. But just remember, it's a person on the other end of that email, and they have, even if it doesn't feel like it to you, I guarantee you they've been working hard, and I guarantee you they have been stressed about it. If you're not getting in rooms and you're not getting auditions, I guarantee you it's not going to come as a surprise to your agent that you're upset about this, because they will be upset about it as well. Because we don't take people on that we don't believe in. We take you on because we think you're incredibly talented, and we hope that we can do something for you. So just acknowledge that. Acknowledge that you know that they've been working hard, but it's just not connecting for you. I do think the best agent-actor relationships are built on trust and time. Particularly with young graduates, there's this feeling that it all has to happen in 6 months. And it very rarely does. And I really would say give it time. Give the relationship time to develop. But if you don't trust your agent and you can't communicate with your agent, and I ask my clients to email me once a week, very few of them do, thankfully. Otherwise, I would spend all my time reading these emails. But I do say in my initial interview, I'm happy to hear from you once a week, and I would like that to be an email that tells me what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're up to, because I need to build a picture of you very, very quickly, because we need to establish this relationship very, very fast in order for this to work. And I can't do that if I'm only seeing you at a press night, or once every 6 months for a catch-up, or once a year for a catch-up. So please feel free to email me any questions, tell me what you're up to. It helps me to build a picture of how you're developing and where your interests are lying, because your interests are going to change as soon as you leave drama school and you stop being surrounded by musical theatre people or straight actors or people obsessed with working in TV or film, and you start to develop your own interests. And if I'm consistently subbing you for musical theatre and actually you really have developed an interest in puppetry or physical theatre or something else, then we're not on the same page, and I need to know that. Yeah, leaving your agent is hard because it is a relationship. It's probably the most important relationship you'll have in your career, and that's why I say give it time, which is why I hold 2 2-hour meetings before I sign somebody. In my experience, we don't talk about the usual agent-actor things in those interviews. I'm fascinated.
Percentages, commissions,
That can all be done via email when you read the contract. If you've got a question on that, send it in and I'll answer that. But in those initial meetings, I'm much more interested in finding out why the fuck you want to do this. Yeah. So I always take it back to your first experiences of theatre, because I need to get to know you. So for me, I'm building a personal relationship. And I always say you wouldn't marry somebody after meeting them for 20 minutes. So why would you sign with an agent after meeting them for 20 minutes? So I spend at least 2 hours with people before I sign them. Because you might not like me. I'm quite intense, and for some people don't want an agent that they can pick up the phone to and moan about their boyfriend or their flatmate. And some agents don't want to do that, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong way to do this. But I am that type of agent, and my clients are, I think, fairly used to getting texts from me at like 11 o'clock at night, going, "I'm a bit worried about your mental health after something I saw on Twitter today. Are you okay?" Or "You've had 7 auditions this week. That must be taking its toll on you physically and emotionally. How are you feeling?"
Yeah.
And if you don't want that kind of relationship with your agent, I'm not the right agent for you.
No.
And so that's why I spend 2 hours, and I have had people who've kind of stood up at the end of these meetings and gone, "Thank you, that was really interesting, but I don't think I want to work with you, simply because I want a little less hands-on."
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to be told what to do. I try not to be didactic, but I'm always right. And actually, I joke about that, but actually that's one of the things that I think it brings it back to trust again.
Yeah.
Decisions are made about you by your agent all day, every day, that you have no idea about and no control over. from what we sub you for to what we say about you to how we sell you, because that's what an agent does. We sell you. We're pitching you to casting directors and producers. And you've got no control over that because you're not sat next to me listening in or reading my emails. So you have to trust that the person that you are entrusting your career to has your best interests at heart and knows you. So when you're leaving an agent, for me, that can be like breaking up with a lover.
Just as a sort of a handy step-by-step flowchart, what do you think is the appropriate way of doing it? Because, of course, from an actor's perspective, they want to. There is that feeling, which I've heard so many times. They say, well, I'm going to stay with my agent just until I find the new one. And I always say, well, that can be very dangerous territory. As from my experience, agents bump into each other all the time. And the first thing that will be discussed is, oh, I saw one of your clients, and I've heard it. I've been on the street with an
Absolutely.
agent. So what do you think is the professional way, step by step, of leaving an agent to go to another agency?
I would say the first step is to call or email the agent and say, I don't think things are working. Could we have a chat? Can we come in and see if we can sort this out? The response may then be, I agree with you, things aren't working, and I've been thinking about this, and I think it's probably best if you move on. Or it might be, oh my God, you're thinking of leaving? Please come in, let's have a chat, let's try and work out what I can do. So that, I think, should always be the first step, to say, I think things have gone a bit skew-if here, let's have a chat about it and see if we can get things back on track. Or, I think things have gone a bit skew-if here, and I think it's the right time for me to move on and get a fresh pair of eyes. So that's the first step. The second step would then be, having tried that, if that doesn't work, to then email in and say, Dear JBR, I'm really sorry to do this. I've been giving this a lot of thought. This isn't a decision I've taken lightly, but I think it's time for me to move on. Thank you for everything that you've done for me in my career. Is there a notice period? How does this work from here?
So an anonymous listener has written in, Hi Andrew, how's things? Loving the podcast and the variety of guests and topics. Thank you very much. I have a question for JBR, which is how actors can handle periods of no or very few auditions. Can they personally be doing more? Can their agent be doing more? Or do you just have to weather the drought and wait for the next heat wave?
All three.
Right.
It is. It's. I was chatting to a client this morning who's going through a bit of a drought not in auditions, but in work, in booking work. And he came in, and I was slightly concerned that this was going to be one of those meetings where it's like, what are you doing? You're not doing enough. And it wasn't. And he came in and he said, I realized that my last couple of jobs stepped me up into another bracket. And now I'm sat at the bottom of that bracket instead of the top of my old one. So, of course, it's quiet for me, and I understand. And I think that's really important. Every single actor in the world goes through peaks and troughs, and it happens when you change your headshots, because, of course, a casting director is going, ooh, where's Judy? Let me have a look at her on Spotlight. And they call up your picture and they go, oh, God, Judy doesn't look like I remember her. And it takes changing your headshots, it takes a little while for that to settle down. Being in work, bizarrely, can lead to an immediate drought afterwards, particularly if you've done some really good TV, because suddenly you're not going up for the one-liners anymore. You're going up for the smaller parts or the lead roles. And again, you're sat now in the bottom of a different bracket. So that can lead to an immediate drought. The idea that you go from the idea that you're climbing a ladder at any point in this industry is absolutely insane. Yeah. Everyone's going up and then down and up and then down. But there are things that you can do. And if it is a bit of a fallow period for you, I always say bring it back to two things, because that's what the casting director, because I don't cast you, I really have very little say in who a casting director brings in. Bring it back to two things, your headshot and your CV. And I work quite closely with my clients to help them understand how we read CVs and how we look at them and how they can make their CV sing and really emphasize their boom credits, that I call them. But also the headshot. When was it last updated? To you, it might seem that you've had 3 auditions this year, but to a casting director, they might have seen your headshot 15, 16, 17 times for different projects. A bit of headshot fatigue can start to fall in. I had an experience not long ago where a casting director of a major theatre called one of my clients in, and they were on holiday. And I said, oh, I'm really sorry, they're actually on holiday. And she said, gosh, they must be doing well. They're always on holiday whenever I call. And I went back through the file and I said, do you know, you haven't called them in since last year. And she said, gosh, has it been that long? And I think that's the thing. Time moves slightly differently on this side of the table than it does for you, particularly when you're out of work. And it does seem
And you've got bills to pay.
And you've got bills to pay. And it seems like everybody else is working or announcing something exciting. And it can feel like nothing's happening. I do think headshot fatigue can be part of it. So it might be that changing the headshot might work, tweaking the CV might work, upskilling, updating your skills, or just, and using that downtime to just kind of focus on what it is you want to do.
There was a wonderful quote that you had in one of your previous mailing lists, and I want to see if you can remember it off the top of your head. Somebody said about "Don't show me."
Yes, I remember this quote. Don't make me hunt through shit for diamonds. Just show me the diamonds.
I thought that when I read that, I immediately thought, Christ, you know what? There's a good 9 credits that just don't need to be on my
Absolutely.
CV.
If you want to be seen by Nina Gold, she probably has very little interest in the stand-up comedy show that you did at the Hen and Chickens. So tailor your CV towards the people that you want to attract. And I read so many CVs that use it as a list of every single thing they've ever done, from one-night gigs here to scratch nights there to rehearsed readings there. And in amongst that are some great credits, some really top theatres, some brilliant directors, some top production houses. And they're lost in amongst this sort of miasma of all the other stuff. All that stuff is great. All that stuff is fantastic. It's what keeps your juices flowing. It's what makes you feel excited about being an actor. It's not necessarily important. And I always say this, ask yourself, why is it important that somebody knows this about me? Yeah. Why is it important that you know that I worked at that venue or on that play or with that director? And if you can't come up with a good answer for that question, it probably shouldn't be on your CV, because it's probably detracting from the really good stuff that actually you want people to focus on.
I have another question just in regards to leaving an agent here as well, which always sounds like quite a sad question. But it's when moving from one agent to another, how long should one wait before contacting them again? Obviously, they're very busy people, but it's hard to tell if that's a no full stop or if they're just unavailable to see a show when there is no reply whatsoever.
Oh, God, this is such a tough one. I think the best advice I can give there is read the room. If you're getting a standard response, or a brusque response, which is I'm very sorry, I'm busy, probably leave it, a while. If you're getting a response that's like, I'm sorry, I'm busy that night, but that sounds like a really interesting project. Please let me know when you're next in something. Then read the room, keep in touch with them. I'm sorry, you clash with somebody on my books. Now, unfortunately, that can be code, because agents, like I said, agents are human, and sometimes we don't want to upset people or hurt them.
The question I always have with that, because of course, I haven't had an acting agent for donkey's years, but I remember saying to my first acting agent, he said, I'm really sorry, I've got someone on the books that looks just like you. And I said, well, I'll work when he's busy then. And he looked at me in such a way and he said, I like that response. And lo and behold, he signed me. And I said, well, I'll do all the stuff that he doesn't get.
Well, I went into a drama school recently and they said, talk to us about clashes on books. We hear about this quite a lot. And I said, well, there's 2 clashes, girls and boys. Yeah. Ultimately, so many casting breakdowns are particularly in the sort of 20 to 30 bracket. So many casting breakdowns are simply blonde, high belt, 20 to 30. Now, almost every girl on any agent's books is probably going to fall into that, and there's a clash in there. And
a few of the men as well.
And very possibly. So sometimes, I'm sorry, you clash with another client. Sometimes that is code for, I'm really sorry, I'm not interested. But sometimes it is legitimately true. Sometimes if you are quite specific casting, it is legitimately true that there is a clash. And I try not to have more than 2 people who look very, very similar to each other, because, as you said, when one's working, I need another one. Yeah. And that,
always good to have a spare.
Always good to have a spare.
Good writing designers.
But sometimes it it's difficult to read the room. I tend to say, if I am interested in somebody, I will tend to say, I'm really sorry, I'm not taking on clients at the moment, but please keep in touch with me. And I mean that honestly. I mean that genuinely. I want that person to keep in touch with me. And it may be that it's a year or 2 years before I actually, can do anything with them. But I'm always interested in, and I follow actors obsessively on Twitter and social media. I love following graduates that I've interviewed and lost to other agents. I still follow their careers. I still go see their shows. I still give them a hug afterwards. I'm not trying to poach them at all. I'm just invested in them. I've spent 2 hours with them.
My final question is, what are the top sort of do's and don'ts when it comes to the actor and or let's say the theatre maker and agent relationship? What are the common things that just grind your gears?
Nothing grinds my gears. And I've said this before, and people laugh and they say you're lying. I try, when something really gets me, when something really irritates me, I ask myself, is this something I would have done when I was an actor? And the answer is usually yes. I would absolutely have done this, behaved like this, written that email, said that. And so I kind of go, okay, take a step back, because if you do it, other people will do it. And I don't like do's and don'ts either, because like I've said, it's just my opinion.
Sure.
I would say, remember, it's a relationship, and it's not a personal relationship. It is a business relationship. But also remember that within that business relationship, the power is really skewed. It's really bizarre. Because, like I said earlier, you have no control over decisions that I make about you all day, every day. But actually, I'm expecting you to do 90% of the work. And that's a quote from Billy Porter, who was in Kinky Boots, that he was bitching with an older actor in the pub one day and saying, "Oh, my agent doesn't do anything for me." I can't do an American accent. Probably why I never did anything American. And he was bitching in the pub and saying, "No, my agent doesn't do anything for me." And the older actor said, "Well, your agent takes 10%, so they do 10% of the work."
Great.
And I use that all the time because I think that's so important.
That better be in the next mailing list. That's a brilliant one to bring back.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's a great one.
Your agent only gets 10%. So that is superb. That's almost inspired me just across the table. I'm write that down, people, in all of your actors' notebooks and directors' notebooks and whatever. Yeah, I love that.
This is casting director Annie Rowe, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats. I hope you've learned your sides.
So let's start at the very beginning.
A very good place to start.
Very good.
So if you don't answer that when somebody says that, are you really a musical theatre person?
I just do this. I just showed them the door. People have.
Thanks very much. This interview is over.
So, Josh, where were you born, and where did you grow up as a young lad?
Do you want the full, really interesting, weird story? Okay.
Authenticity, yeah.
I'm second generation Irish immigrant. My parents moved over here in the late 50s, early 60s, around about that time. Not sure, because my mother won't admit to how old she is. But my dad was a singer. He was a cabaret singer, and he used to work the nightclub and the pub circuit. He was, I think the stage once described him as Ireland's answer to Tom Jones.
Oh.
Not sure that was a question that Wales were asking, but in case they were, there was my dad. And he did some musicals and stuff like that. So I kind of grew up in that family. But working the pub circuit, he worked at a place called the Blind Beggar, which is in East London, and was a favourite drinking haunt of Reggie and Ronnie Kray.
God.
Yeah. And this is how the story goes now. He was drinking in the pub one night, and one of the Kray twins was chatting to him and saying, how are you settling in London? How's life? Blah, blah, blah. Because they liked him as a pub singer, and they used to come in and see him all the time. And they were struggling. Mum and Dad were struggling at the time. And a couple of days later, Dad was performing in the pub, and the barman said to him, "Oh, Reggie left this for you." And it was a card, and it said, "Ring this number." So Dad rang this number, and it was a mortgage broker who said, "Oh, yeah, we've got a house for you." So I don't know, but the story is that Ronnie and Reggie helped my parents to buy their first house, which was in Archway, which is where I was born, which is actually bizarrely about 5 minutes from where I live now. And we moved around quite a bit. So I was brought up in Kilburn. just off the Kilburn High Road, just before the Tri-School Theatre opened. And my sister was one of the first members of the Tri-School Youth Theatre, along with the actress Jenny Jules. So I always grew up in this world. I was in and out of the Tri-School Theatre all through my primary school. Matthew Kelly taught me circus skills at the Tri-School Youth Theatre. And Jenny Jules used to babysit me, and I still text Jenny every so often and try and see her in shows whenever I can. So I grew up in Kilburn in a very, not strict Irish Catholic family, but certainly at the time, Mass every Sunday, church every Sunday, and I went to a Catholic primary school.
Because that does answer a question, because I have that as later in life, you would end up becoming a choir boy for and actually considering a career in the priesthood.
That's right.
You're impressed.
That's good, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Or, as you said, it's all about being interested, not interesting. So you as the, how shall I put this? You as the renowned homosexual that you are, and being brought up Catholic, were they two sort of fighting demons that was going on in your head?
Were and are. I don't think you ever get over. And I went to a very strict Catholic secondary school. I went to the London Oratory. And we were one of the last, I think we were the last school in the country to get rid of the cane. And it's run by an order called the Fathers of the Oratory. And every high day and holy day...
Fathers of the Oratory.
Tell me.
It just sounds like the gayest cabaret, doesn't it?
The stories, honestly. But every high day and holy day, the entire school of 1,200 boys and some girls in the sixth form would walk all the way from the London Oratory in Fulham to the Brompton Oratory Church, a couple of miles, and attend Mass. And before... before any big mass, the Father Napier, one of the fathers of the oratory, would come in and speak to each house individually, and he would lecture us on self-instrumentation.
Oh, good grief.
And that if we had indulged in the practice of self-instrumentation, we must make sure that we went to confession before we took the sacrament. Gosh. So that's the school.
It's just abuse, isn't it?
It's
just abuse. That's what it is.
It was during the time that Section 28 came in, and it was around the time of the AIDS crisis and the Don't Die of Ignorance leaflets came through every single door. And it really... I think it suppressed any kind of homosexual instinct that I had. It was also an all-boys school until we got to the sixth form. And it was a very rugby school as well. So, I mean, imagine, I took piano and clarinet for 7 years just so I didn't have to play rugby. I can't play either the piano or the clarinet, but I took lessons for 7 years so that I didn't have to play rugby. It was that kind of school. It
almost says a lot about where you were as well at that time. If you can't remember playing the instrument, I wonder what else you can't remember from that time.
It's bizarre. I do remember one of my teachers who's now dead, my English teacher. It's always an English or drama teacher. We didn't have drama at my school. It wasn't considered proper. And I remember when I went to university to study drama, I was very much told that this wasn't what an oratorian did. But I do remember my English teacher around about the time of Section 28 coming up to me and keeping me aside after class one day and saying, I know what you're going through, and I wish I could talk to you about it, but I'm not allowed. And I didn't know what I was going through.
I think you're being very guarded with what I can imagine actually would have been a very tough time.
I'm not guarded about it at all. There are people I feel a need to protect from that time. I was bullied horrendously at school. And it's funny because... I'm not really in touch with anybody from school, but the few people I am, when I've talked about bullying on social media, they've said, I had no idea you were going through that. And it's like, to me, and I've got my diary from that period, and I mean, God, and you know that program where people go on and read their diary, and it's all very funny, and I thought, oh, that'd be great for me to go on. I'll take my... And I'm not being overly dramatic here. Every single page is me wanting to kill myself.
Yeah.
And me and not talk. And there are sort of phrases in it that I look back on now and go, oh, I know what that means. It's like, I met someone today. I know exactly what that means. I'm not guarded. I am kind of guarded, but that's my upbringing, and that's who I am, and I've been guarded about that all my life. But there was one kid who was in the choir with me who thought it would be fun to, remember those old booths that you used to be able to print business cards on.
Yeah.
Now we've got Vistaprint and Moodprint.
There
I
was
say
a
that, I'm giving
supermarket
them
or a
free
train
advertising.
station.
Yeah. And you'd go in, you'd put your pound coin in, and you'd get 50 business cards. He went to one of those booths and he printed out Rent Boy with my name and the school's phone number. And he put them up in all the phone boxes around the school. And I've still got in my diary, I've still got the letter of apology that he was made to write to me after that. But I was off school for quite a while after that. And everyone, it was just, and we talked about this earlier off air, it was, you cope with that by turning it into an anecdote and making it funny and going, the time that they put up Rent Boy posters about me all around Fulham. And actually that's horrendously damaging. Throw Catholicism into that. I was fucked up until I was 30.
There does seem to be one sort of bit of holy light, as it were, and that is you as a chorister, which would have you singing as a male soprano. Am I right in saying?
Boy soprano.
Was that your first experience of the theatre? How did that come about?
My first experience of theatre was the Megan Mogg show with Maureen Lipman at the Unicorn when it was at the Arts Theatre in West End. But my first experience of performing and being paid for it, that was at English National Opera. And that came about because I was in the school choir, and in my first year at school, we were asked to form part of the backstage chorus for Wagner's Parsifal.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just kind of loved it. I had a great time. And it was 3 nights a week, and we were only in the last chorus, so I got to stay up late. I was 11, and it was like, the show didn't come down. It's Wagner, the show didn't come down until God knows what time.
4 days later,
yeah.
in the ring.
And I don't know why, but the children's administrator, Peter, he just kind of took a liking to me, and he asked me to come back and audition the following year for a small role in Werther. And I went back and I got that, and so I was doing that 3 times a week, and this all helped because I was out rehearsing at English National Opera. I was out of school 3 days a week, so that all helped me to kind of cope with the bullying and cope with what was going on because I had this escape. And then from there it just kind of continued, and I just kind of kept auditioning for different parts at English National Opera, and I just kept doing more and more and more. And I was, it's interesting because I and some people do a lot of research on me, and they say, I can't find any records of you at English National Opera. I actually changed my name when I was 18. And I had a stage name anyway, so it's quite difficult to kind of find anything on me from that period. But I was in Nick Heitner's original production of Magic Flute, which then ran for 21 years, not with me in it. But that was my first principal role, and then I just kind of hung around and just did a few more. I worked with Nick Heitner twice, once when I was 13, 14, and again when I was 18, and I was travelling down from Bristol to do it. And that's where I grew up. I grew up at English National Opera. In those days, the sort of hands-on parenting that we have now, and it didn't really exist.
I had exactly the same thing.
I was getting home after a show, which would come down at 10:30 at night. I was coming home on my own. And I wasn't. I was kind of 13, 14, and I was knocking around Soho.
Yeah.
Not going into the pubs, not going into the clubs, but I was definitely knocking around Old Compton Street for a good half hour, 40 minutes, and just getting home late and saying, oh, yeah, the show overran, or we hung around in the dressing room chatting. And so all through that period, I was going to school in my uniform and Catholic and mass every morning and Catholic education, and then going off in the afternoon to rehearse at English National Opera. And I remember these fabulous chorus boys taking me under their wing and showing me magazines, which of course you look back on that now and go, that's weird in itself. And then doing this show at night, and we had our own bow, so
but like rock stars, I suppose.
At 12, 13, and earning a lot of money. And then at night, going out onto the streets of Soho and just knocking around at Brief Encounter and Compton's and those places and just watching the world.
Now, what I do want to ask, I have asked if we can discuss this. I understand also around that age, it was also a time where you encountered your relationship and your ongoing relationship with alcohol.
Yeah.
How did your affair with the bottle begin so young?
I think there's a culture, there's an Irish culture of, and I remember this is one of my clearest memories of my childhood when I was at primary school. Of Sundays, we'd go to the Irish club, where all the Irish people in Kilburn would get together on Sunday, and I would sing. I would sing Danny Boy and Fields of Athenry and all of these little songs, and people would buy me drinks. And, we're talking the sort of late 70s, early 80s, and giving a kid half a pint of Guinness on a Sunday was not the huge scandal that it is now. And so alcohol was always a part of my life. Alcohol was always there. It was always accessible. It was never prohibited. It was never something that I kind of needed to be scared of or be afraid of. And of course, I was obsessed with Judy Garland.
Of course, you still are.
Yeah. So, and I do kind of remember, I remember buying into that and that kind of, oh my God, the tragic artist addicted to drink and drugs. And I remember very clearly thinking that was something to aspire to. And it just kind of escalated from there, from like Sunday, half a Guinness, singing for, drunks in a pub, to my parents not being around and there being a fully stocked drinks cabinet. And of course, at that age, you're trying marijuana and drugs for the first time, and you've got an empty flat. So people come back to your flat after school on a Friday and you just get drunk for the whole weekend. And it was a party. And the party stopped for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It didn't stop for me, and it became something that I needed to do every single day, to the point where all through my A-levels, I had a hip flask of vodka in my bag, and that continued right through university, right through my time working as a stage doorkeeper at the Dominion Theatre. I was a daily drinker, and my diaries from those time literally are just like every single day I was drunk. Every single day I was drunk and crying and wanting to kill myself, and it was miserable.
Hello, my dears. You have the ineffable and probably undeserved pleasure of listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats. This is Stephen Fry wishing you a wonderful listen. Thank you.
So let's talk about drag queens and a pub in Dalston as a certain chapter of your life. So we go from
the boys' pub of the year, 2 years running.
2 years. I'm sure you've still got the award somewhere in a box.
It was before the days of awards. I think we got a certificate, a paper certificate that we stuck up on the wall.
I bet it's still in a folder somewhere in some drawer.
Probably.
So there aren't many people who are able to, buy and run a pub. Tell me more about the pub and tell me how you had ended up there. And I also want to know...
Ended up?
Yeah.
How did your career go from principal boy soprano at English National Opera?
Working with Nick Heitner to... I'm going to,
to Misdemeanor, the diva of Dalston.
Misdemeanor, was that the name of the act?
That was the name.
So,
and actually, my opening song was "I am Misdemeanor, the diva of Dalston."
That's a Man of La Mancha reference for those who don't get that.
Well, the gay scene at that point was on its last legs. The old scene of your local gay pub, and actually prior to that, I'd always insisted that wherever I lived had to be within walking distance of a gay bar.
Yeah.
But by the time we had Crystals...
I would love to see that conversation with the estate agent at Foxton's. So, darling, what do you need? Well, I need a tube, a second bathroom, and a 5-minute walk of a gay bar.
It pretty much went like that.
Yeah.
It was... Do you know what? It's one of the periods in my life that I look back on with so much affection and so much horror as well at the same time. And I'm obsessed with RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. I love how drag has evolved and changed. But UK drag is very different and still is. And those queens that we talk about, Dave Lynn, Sandra, they're still going. And they're still doing their act. And they're still fantastic. Titty LeCamp and... people like that. They're amazing. Miss Jason. And I used to book all of them at Crystals, and I used to share a stage with them. And actually, Charlie Hides, who rocked up on RuPaul, we used to book him a lot at Crystals. But I'd never seen drag like that. He came with like projectors and screens and videos and stuff. I'd never... At that point, drag was still, clearly a man in a dress.
Yeah.
Pint glass with a straw in it and
a microphone covered in glitter and lipstick
and the old trick of dropping the mic and catching it with the other hand and all the old lines of and actually when you look back on it, racist and lesbian phobic and actually I decided I couldn't do that, and you certainly couldn't have got away with that in Dalston at the time. And so Misdemeanor, we created this character, and she was a lesbian. And she had a girlfriend, Diesel, who was played by my very good friend Maya. And it was Diesel and Dolly, and they'd been a couple for 14 years, and that was the act. And because Stoke Newington had a huge lesbian population at the time, and I couldn't alienate them, and I didn't want to. And I didn't want to be the drag queen up there telling, lesbian jokes about pool playing and
stage management,
and stage management and stuff. And yet that was kind of expected. So I had to kind of come up with a way of being able to do that, but from an affectionate point of view. So Misdemeanor became a lipstick lesbian, and Diesel Demeanor, she took my name, dear. I'm the fucking star after all. And she was a chapstick lesbian, and it was very affectionate, and it was done in that kind of, and it was very musical theatre. And I sang live. There was no lip syncing.
This is what I don't like about it. I mean, I look.
Lip syncing is an art. It is an art.
Absolutely.
But it was a terrific time, and it was, for me, I think it was when UK drag was at its height. Lily Savage had just kind of moved to the mainstream. Dame Edna Everage, the Dame Edna Experience was doing every Sunday at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern. And there were people like Cher Travesty who were really, and God bless her, she's dead now.
Trashville, Tennessee.
And
was great.
And they were reinventing UK drag back then. And it was a really exciting time for me and I fell into it by accident. I mean, there was no sort of, I want to be a drag queen plan. It happened one night. We couldn't afford to book an act every Friday and Saturday, and people kind of expect that in your local drag pub. But we couldn't afford to do that. So Friday night, we'd book like an up-and-comer for like 50 quid, and I would do the intro. So I would do sort of a 20-minute bit of like, maybe this time, and all of that stuff. And then the newcomer would come on and do sort of 40 minutes. So you got an hour's show. And then Saturday night, we'd splash out and we'd spend like the £200 and we'd get Sandra or Dave Lynn or Candy Kane or people like that. Pam Ann, who's not a drag queen, by the way.
No.
And we'd get them to do the Saturday. But I'd still do the intro, but it would be my title song and then an introduction. So I'd only do that. And then there was one, I'm not going to say who it was because he's still working on the scene and he's fantastic, but he cancelled. And he cancelled at 7:00 on a Saturday night. And there was absolutely no time to get a new drag queen. So my partner at the time, he said, you're on and you're doing it. So I had like 3 hours to knock up an hour's set, which was basically, it was all just musical theatre because I didn't know anything else at that point. So I just did this hour set and it went down really well. And people went up to my partner and to us afterwards and said, I don't know why you're fucking spending 200 quid on these tired old drag queens when you've got a great drag queen right here. And it just continued from there. I didn't get the Saturday night slot for a long time.
And this is your pub.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the conversation. I need to talk to the manager. Oh, it's me.
It's me.
Saturday night.
But
no, Josh,
I got the Friday night slot, and I did a show called Misdemeanor's Cabaret Choice. And because I didn't think I was funny. I don't think I'm funny. And so I couldn't do the whole sort of, I was walking down the road one day, my dad, I couldn't do that. So it was literally just me singing for an hour. And because I had no kind of way of knowing of how to craft the show at that point, it was like, I called it like it was like karaoke. Think of me as a human karaoke machine.
Yeah.
And I handed out a list of like 40 songs that I knew, and they were on all the tables. And I said, just shout out a number. And Diesel, who did my mic, Diesel will press the number if she can work out where it is. And she'd press the number and I'd just sing the song. So I was like a human karaoke machine. And over time that evolved. And over time I got braver. And eventually Misdemeanor did become this kind of comedy character where she'd do a sort of 20-minute stand-up set before she'd sing anything. And it was a really exciting time. But again, I was going on stage blind drunk, sometimes off my head on ecstasy. I remember doing a show with Miss Julie Page and she looked at me and she was like, go away.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? And she went, you're tripping.
Yeah.
Go away. And I had to get off the stage and go upstairs. But yeah, it was, and we'd do these amazing charity events where we'd start at 10 in the morning and we'd finish at 3 in the morning, and it would be one drag queen after another. And Sandra would host alongside me, and we'd just do like 16 hours on our feet in heels and drag, hosting one act after another. And people, of course, would ring up from the Black Cap, and it would be, Crystal Wade would call and say, I've just finished my set at the Black Cap. Can I come down and do a bit for you? And it would be amazing. And all these acts would just turn up and do a couple of songs. And it was fantastic. I loved it. And actually, doing that got me, probably my best ever job, which was Pride, because Stephen Beresford, who wrote Pride, lived in Stoke Newington, and he used to come into the pub at weekends.
I was going to ask because I know lots and lots of people who are in that movie.
You probably know more than I do. People keep
Probably.
coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you must know so and so," introducing me to people and saying, "You were both in Pride together," and I'm like, "Do you understand how a film works?"
No, sure, but no. Firstly, there is a mate, Jonathan Blake, who is a very dear friend, who is the Dominic West character.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, if you look over there on my shelves of all those awards, you'll see.
Sorry, let me move them all out of the way,
Thank you, love.
Andrew.
But you'll notice in front of all the awards is a little pin. And it's an LGSM pin.
We talked about this on Twitter
by Johnny Blake. But it does. I remember when I first saw it, which I have to say, Pride is one of my all-time.
I've only seen it
films.
once.
Oh, you soulless bastard! Well, of course you were in it.
I can't watch it. I can't. I saw it once and it destroyed me.
I
did spend the first 10 minutes clutching my husband's hand, going, "What if I'm shit?" And I haven't been able to watch it since.
This is West End producer, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with the sumptuous, the savoury, and the slightly sugary Andrew Keats, dear.
You would end up becoming a teacher.
Yeah.
Whereabouts and what were you teaching?
Do you know, I discovered this the other day, last night, I think. I became a teacher at Chingford Foundation School, which, if you're into football,
I am not.
Which I am not either, is the school that produced David Beckham and Dwight Gale and Harry Kane.
Famous for their intellect. Absolutely.
And I actually taught Dwight Gale, who I think is a footballer for Newcastle. I don't know. Maybe should.
Harry Kane is the quite successful one in the old World
He's
Cup
the England,
thing, isn't he?
England captain.
That's the one.
Yeah. And while I don't remember teaching Harry, he was there at the same time as me. So, and somebody said to me last night, well, you absolutely would have covered a lesson with him. And they sent me a photo of Harry in school uniform and I was like, well, I taught him and I remember him and I definitely taught him. And so I taught Harry Kane.
Should we put that as the podcast title?
Josh
Boyd-Rochford taught Harry Kane. And what were you teaching? Was it English?
I taught
drama?
English, media and drama.
I haven't heard yet that you've become sober.
Mm-hmm. You said earlier I'm quite guarded, so I'm going to try not to be guarded here. After we sold the pub, I was out of money. I'd sold my flat, but we'd bought a house in Stoke Newington, and we had lodgers, and so I wasn't paying rent or bills. I didn't have any outgoings in the way that people do. And our living room was in our basement. It was one of those odd houses, and the living room was in the basement, and I was basically living in the basement. And I was still drinking in the pub. We'd sold it to a lesbian couple who turned it into a sort of straight family pub, and I was still drinking there every day. And then I was taking a lot of cocaine and just going back to this basement and watching Big Brother all night and smoking lots of weed and taking sleeping pills so that I could get to sleep, and then waking up in the morning and starting to drink again. And this was going... I essentially had completely isolated myself, was living in a basement, wasn't seeing anybody, answering the phone, going out at all. And I decided I needed to do something with my life that I could do very easily, very simply, that wouldn't be very taxing for me or very difficult, and I could do it until I died. And I remember that thought process very, very clearly, thinking, I need to just find something that I can do until I can collect my pension and die. And I hit upon teaching. Yeah. And so I went to teacher training college. I went to London Met University, and I was still actively drinking at the time. And in fact, I remember the day that my final project had to be handed in, and I was having a sort of let's hand our project party in at my flat, and there were about 4 other teachers there, and we had a hot tub in our garden at the time, so we were all in the hot tub drinking vodka and champagne and celebrating. And we looked at our watches and we were like, okay, right, it's 3:00 and we have to, the deadline is 5, so let's get out of the hot tub and walk up to the university and hand in our coursework. And I was like, great, I just have to print mine off.
Oh, no, no ink. Don't tell me no ink in the printer.
No ink in the printer.
God.
And it then literally became one of those insane, drunken anecdotes of racing around with remember floppy disks?
I do.
Racing around with a floppy disk, trying to find somebody that would print it out. And I got it in at 5:01.
Good grief.
And then we went back and started drinking again. And then
Probably a lot heavier than you were to begin with.
And then I went on to placement at Chingford Foundation School, and I was still drinking at that time. And I did my first. No, I went on placement at Cardinal Pole School in Hackney, and I was still drinking at the time. And I went out one Friday night, and what was that old club that used to be behind the Astoria?
Oh, it was, I know, the Ghetto.
The Ghetto. And I was in there one night, and I fell over and I knocked my front teeth out.
Did you?
Yeah.
You would have no idea now.
Well, that's because they're veneers.
Oh, are they?
But there isn't a tooth there. That one is
That's amazing.
Is a bridge. And I knocked my front teeth out, and they saved that one. But it then gets filed down for veneers. And so I did my teaching practice with like this huge sort of cement and wires holding everything together.
Oh my God.
And then I did my second teaching practice at Chingford, still drinking every day. And I remember teaching a class and one of the kids saying to me, "God, so you really stink of alcohol. Did you have a heavy night last night?" And that kind of hit me a little bit.
Wow.
But it was the summer break between, and I remember breaking up at the end of the year, and we had a sort of teachers' party, and all the kids had gone home, and we were having this big teachers' party with food and wine. And I remember staring at this bottle of red wine on the table and really having this urge to grab it and just run with it.
Wow.
And because we would get people coming around and pouring. You can't pour a glass of wine for an alcoholic. It's not enough. That glass of wine will be gone by the time you poured the next person. And I remember thinking, I've got to sip this bloody glass for the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
And I remember fixating on this bottle of red wine in front of me and thinking, I just want to grab that and run. And I went home that night, and some other things happened, and I ended up in hospital, and nobody came to visit me. And that was another turning point for me, that I had destroyed all my friendships and all my relationships to the point that I was in hospital. And other than my sister, who drove up from where she lived in Surrey, my partner, who we weren't together at the time, but we still lived together, he didn't come. None of my so-called friends came, and I was in hospital on my own with just my sister there. And we thought it was the end, to be honest. And I remember thinking that very clearly and being quite relieved. And I woke up the next morning and I knew that something had to change. And I found AA, and I went to AA, and it was a journey. I'm not saying I went to my first meeting and immediately got sober. I went to my first meeting and then went out and got drunk. And a couple of weeks later, I went back, and then I did something that's actually very dangerous. So if you are listening to this and you do think you have a problem, please don't do this. I stopped drinking cold turkey. And I later discovered it was extraordinarily dangerous for the amount that I was drinking at the point, and for how long I'd been drinking that amount. It was extraordinarily dangerous thing for me to do. But I stopped drinking cold turkey, and for about a week I couldn't dress myself because I was like that.
Crikey.
And I was...
Just for listeners who wouldn't have seen, Josh sort of being radio.
I forget, it's radio.
It is radio, but Josh was showing just with his hands just how shaky he was. And that's not just a tremor, that's a very rapid movement.
And I have a diary from that period and from the day after I stopped drinking, and my handwriting is completely illegible. Completely illegible. It literally looks like a spider fell in an ink pot and scrawled all over it. And I keep that to remind myself of how bad it was. But I was having psychotic breaks. I imagined that I could stop the Iraq War. I was talking to angels who were coming to visit me. And later, when I worked with a sponsor, he said, "You could have died. The amount that you were drinking to stop like that, you could have died." And it was a horrible, horrible time. And then I got sober. And then it was really strange because then I started my job at Chingford. And of course, I went in absolutely stone cold sober and not a new man, but very much a very different man. And they were like, "What happened to you? You were like always in the pub with us after school, and Friday lunchtimes you'd have 3 pints before coming back to teaching your last class, and now you don't touch it at all. And I got through those 3 years of teaching and getting sober, because getting sober is not something you do overnight. It's a process that you work on, and I still work on. And I got through those 3 years of teaching and getting sober and realised that I wasn't going to die. Well, I am going to die. We're all going to die. But I wasn't going to die. And I wasn't capable of hiding away in a job that actually I didn't enjoy at all for the next 40 years of my life. And I was in my usual way of, I can't be asked to teach this curriculum, so I'm just going to lecture you on life's mysteries. I remember...
Sounds like drama school.
Yeah. Well, I remember talking to, I think it was my year 10 English class. And no, it would have been my year 11 English class, and they were preparing for their exams. And I was saying to them, look, exams don't mean shit. Seriously. They matter now, and they matter to mum and dad, and they matter to your guardians, and the school thinks they're really important. But in 2-3 years, honestly, they won't mean shit. What matters is that you find what you want to do in life, and you pursue that. And one of the little buggers said, so was teaching what you always wanted to do in life? And it really hit me. And I was like,
Out
no,
of the mouth of babes.
it wasn't at all. And I had to kind of, and as we were saying outside when I had a cigarette, when you are an addict, you don't have the recourse to kind of go, I've had a shit week, Friday night I'm just going to get hammered and forget about it. You have to go, I had a shit week, I have to do something about that. I have to analyse why that's shit, and I have to change something. And 2 days later, I handed in my notice. With nothing. I had no plan other than I knew I wanted to go back to acting. I had not got into drama school. I hadn't even applied to drama school. And I just handed in my notice because I knew that I had to do it.
I'm going to stop there because we're going to talk about how from teaching and dealing with that pain to drama school would come about. But before we do that, I just need to lop one or two of my tips out. That's right, here are my theatrical tips of things to see and do this August 2018. Now, firstly, some of you will be heading to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and that is fantastic. But don't forget, there's still plenty of great theatre for those of you who can't afford or get to Edinburgh this year. Firstly, Spiral at the Park Theatre, London 2018. A bedsit, a young woman in trouble, a bridge, a missing teenager, and parents searching for answers. Struggling to cope with the disappearance of his teenage daughter, secondary school teacher Tom decides to book an escort in an attempt to numb his pain. Little does he realise the impact this will have on both their lives and the lives of those closest to them. Spiral examines the ramifications on the people left behind when a family member disappears, intentionally or otherwise. It questions whether we really know the people we are closest to, what happens when trust breaks down, and whether our past shapes our future. At its heart, the play interrogates whether other people can save us, or whether we must save ourselves. Plays at the Park Theatre 7th of August to the 1st of September at Park 90. Visit parktheatre.co.uk for more information and tickets. I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical at Brasserie Zedel. Returning by popular demand, Alexander Beaumonge's I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical presents everything you could possibly want to know about being a musical theatre performer. This has been one of our top tips before, and I cannot recommend it more highly. It's a great evening for anyone who loves musical theatre. It also has a new cast starring Susie Mathers, Madalena Alberto, Cedric Neal and Lucas Rush. Plays various dates throughout August. Visit brasserizadel.com. Sisterhood, beneath Pleasance Courtyard. Sisterhood transports the audience in this extra live performance to a church cell in Wilmington, where 3 women await their trial in the morning. Soothing and passionate storytelling interweaves the stories of these 3 women with vestiges from the performers' own lives to reveal an immediate and clear association. As the analogue world disappears into the mists of time, Sisterhood questions what kind of world we are leaving to our daughters of the digital age, and how, like the phoenix, we can resurrect our sisterhood from the ashes of patriarchal rule. Plays all of August. Visit pleasance.co.uk for more information and tickets. Have you got a show that you want me to tell our listeners about? Well, please just get in touch by emailing info@arian-productions.com.
Hi, this is Annette Badland, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats.
So you would go from teaching to being taught
Yes.
at the Mountview Academy of Theatre Arts.
Conservatoire.
Oh, was it conservatoire
It was
then?
conservatoire then.
God, GSA went through a conservatoire thing.
Didn't everyone at some
Yeah.
point? It was the thing.
And people always say, "Oh, don't you go to the conservatory?" And you're like, "No, conservatories, no." Although some do have a conservatory, like it is referred to as a conservatory.
Mountview did not have a
No,
conservatory.
it didn't. It was lucky it had walls most of the time. So, is this a part of your life where you find yourself grabbing hold of your life going to Mountview?
No.
No. Okay.
It was certainly the beginning. And I say to my clients, imagine your life as a Netflix series. What season are you on? And whereabouts are you? Are you? And I kind of think I'm coming towards, at this point in time, I think I'm coming towards the end of season 2. I hope I'm coming towards the end of season 2. But Mountview, I think, for me, was sort of the end of season 1.
Yeah.
And being at Mountview was the beginning of season 2 for me, I think. Wanker. But it is, and it's interesting that you say you went from teaching to being taught, because that was a big problem for me. I
Didn't want to listen.
No, not at all. Quite the opposite, actually. It was a big problem for me because I was much older than everybody else on the course by about 10, 12 years. That was a problem for me. And I remember Paul Saby, who I think Paul is phenomenal and an extraordinary teacher. But I do remember him calling me into his office one day and saying, "You don't seem to have made any friends here. I need you to go to the pub with people on Fridays. They all say you never come out with them. I need you to go to the pub." And I was like, I don't drink. And I was very new in sobriety at that point, and pubs were quite a frightening place for me. And he said, "Well, you're going to have to." And I couldn't. So I kind of felt Mountview was a bit of a pause for me. I certainly don't feel that I made great friends from Mountview after I left Mountview, when I was able to be myself. At Mountview, I always felt that I was trying to be somebody else, or fit into. And no tea, no shade, but I don't think Mountview knew what to do with a mid-30 man who, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I didn't look like I was in my mid-30s. So I remember them casting me as Tevye in a show, and like my daughters looked like the same age as me. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I couldn't grow a beard at all. It was just ridiculous. And so I didn't kind of know who I was or what I was doing there. And I do kind of think that part of me went to Mountview to get the name of Mountview on my CV, because I kind of thought that's what I need.
I suppose it sounds unusual, the idea of new musical theatre training. I mean, all I ever remember is every term there being something new they were trying on us as a guinea pig.
It felt like that. But I think that's an important part of training.
Yeah.
And I always say it's so front brain. I use that, and I've looked into it, and I've studied like the workings of the brain since then, and there are technical terms for it, and I can't be bothered to go into them. But I call it front brain acting, and you're just like, learn these 3 songs and for performance class tomorrow, and this speech and this, and you have to do it in one night. And I swear to God, if you asked me to sing any of the songs that I sang in performance class, or to do any of the speeches or any of that stuff, I have no idea. I have not a fucking clue. Because it all just sat in the front brain, and as soon as the performance was over, it's gone.
What is funny, though, is when you bump into people from the drama school time, and they still have a perception of everybody else in that year as they were when they were at drama school.
Yeah.
And you do want to say, I think it's 7 years every cell in the body is replaced.
Yeah.
It's like, they're a physically different human being now compared to the person, but they've still got their hang-ups that, they got chose for the lead role and they were only the supporting part or in the ensemble. It's like, let it go, guys.
I know.
Let it go.
But I talk about this a lot, comparison culture, and we do it all the time. I remember being at Mountview and thinking, well, I'm better than him, but I'm not as good as him. And it's so pointless.
Totally unhelpful.
But the point about changing and developing as an actor and a creative and a practitioner. Do you know Norma? Do you know Norma?
Norma Taller?
Norma and I we butted heads in every single class I think we ever took. I remember one.
That means you cared about each other, though.
One performance class. The task was to prepare an audition song that you would take to West Side Story, and it got to my turn, and Norma said, "So Josh, what have you brought?" And I said, "I haven't prepared anything." And she said, "Well, why haven't you prepared anything?" And I was like, for fuck's sake, I'm never going to be in West Side Story, am I? And it was true. I'm not Hispanic.
No.
I cannot dance.
No.
The only role for me would be Officer Krupke. And it's like, at the time I was in my 30s. There was no, and looked 20. There was no way I was going to be in West Side Story. So I was like, this is pointless. And every week we butted heads, literally.
I remember those
But
days.
I remember emailing her about 5 years later and saying to her, you remember, because we'd been moving house and I'd found all of my reports. I mean, Jesus Christ, reports and percentages and grades.
Yeah.
Fuck off. Not just Mountview, any drama school.
Absolutely.
Fuck off. Irrelevant. It doesn't matter. But I found a report card from Norma and I read what she'd written and I was like, oh my God, I get it.
Because you have the life experience to understand. But
and I
then
emailed her and I said, you probably won't remember this, but in my report, and you wrote this, and I hated you at the time. And like 6 years later, I've just read that and I've gone, oh, fuck.
This is Bill Deemer, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats.
Well, it's time for the Show People podcast platform, the part of the show where we like to give airtime to showcase new writing. And today's work is from new musical The Wicker Husband, with music and lyrics by Darren Clarke, and book by Rhys Jennings. Darren Clarke's work includes the lyrics for the Nuffield Theatre adaptation of Fantastic Mr. Fox, The Scarecrow's Wedding, Edinburgh Festival, UK Tour and West End, for Scamp Theatre, and These Trees Are Made of Blood at the Arcola Theatre and Southwark Playhouse. He is an associate artist and co-founder of children's theatre company Paper Balloon, writing music and lyrics for all their shows. Last month, his musical Day of the Living ran at the Other Place in Stratford as part of the RSC's Mischief Theatre season. Rhys Jennings trained as an actor at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama, and The Wicker Husband is his first professional writing credit. As an actor, Rhys has worked extensively on stage and radio, and won the BBC Carlton Hobbs Radio Award in 2009. Now, The Wicker Husband tells a story of a girl ostracised by her village for being what they deem ugly, when the mysterious old basket maker she meets in the swamp weaves for her the perfect husband. The villagers grow jealous and do everything in their power to tear the two apart. The Wicker Husband was the recipient of the 2016 Stars and Drew Mentorship Award and will be part of the 2018 National Alliance of Musical Theatres Festival of New Musicals in October this year. #Mouthful. We're going to hear a song from the show. Here's The Tailor's Wife. Ringleader of the village's spite sings of the loss of her own child in order to convince the old basket maker to weave her a wicker child, which, unknown to the basket maker, will serve as part of their wicked plan. Sung by Laura Wickham with Josh Sneesby on accordion, Anne-Marie Piazza on ukulele, Rachel Dawson on cello, and composer Darren Clarke on guitar. Here's The Sparrow's Tale from The Wicker Husband.
On the day we were wed, saw a sparrow singing high up in a tree, and she sang a melody, all the hope of the springtime captured in her voice, and her tiny heart fluttering and jumping in her chest. For the rest of the day we heard the sparrow singing sweetly to the sky. Da-dee-di-do, dee-dee-di-do, dee-dee-day, da-dee-di-do, dee-dee-di-day. In a year I returned, and the sparrow had a nest out in the wood. See from where I stood that the nest was abrim with fragile little eggs, and they soon would be opening with sparrows of their own. But alone for the time, I watched the sparrow waiting patient in her nest. Da-dee-di-do, dee-dee-di-do, dee-dee-day, da-dee-di. Suddenly I knew, while that sparrow sang her song, I felt a hope so keenly that she perched within my breast. me why the baby stopped his kicking. The blood was coming thick and fast. I begged for her to save him. The woman couldn't save him, no matter how she tried. My husband sat in corner with his head in hands and cried. And in my heart, the sparrow's song had died. Late that night, in my grief, found the sparrow in her nest up in the tree. And she sang her melody. I could see broken eggshells scattered all around, and her tiny sweet babies all a-chirping through the glade. I would trade with the sparrow if it meant that I might sing that sparrow song. Di-di-di-do, di-di-di-do, di-di-day. Di-di-di-do, di-di-di-day. Di-di-di-do, di-di-di-do, di-di-day. Di-di-di-do,
What's it like listening, Josh, to a little piece of music by your wonderful husband, who's obviously written the book, obviously not the music, but as a part of his story? Is it wonderful?
It is, yes. I call myself the Wicker Widow. I've been living with this show for, God, I don't know, 6-7 years now. I don't know how long it's been from the first idea to getting it to where it is now. And I'm so proud of my husband. He honestly, Rhys is an inspiration to me almost every day. That he's not from this world. He's not musical theatre, and he's made this happen entirely just by pushing and finding a story and just pursuing it and bringing people on board. It's been an extraordinary process watching him discover that, and I'm so proud. The show is beautiful. I'm not just saying that. I'm really quite hard to please.
Yeah.
But the show is beautiful, and I'm so excited for NAMT this year in New York in October, because you'll know NAMT, has
The profile and what it can lead to.
I mean, it Come From Away, Drowsy Chaperone, Thoroughly Modern Millie. These are all past winners of NAMT, and to be chosen as one of the 8 finalists is extraordinary.
It's an honour. It's a real honour.
And hoping we will have some more news about sort of the next stage of this show in the very near future. But it's a wonderful show. I love it so much.
Well, I was delighted when I was asking for submissions for the show, and when I was doing the schedule, I thought, well, if I'm going to have Josh as the main guest, why don't we at least have Rhys as the special platform? So if you'd like to hear more from The Wicker Husband, please just follow @Wicker Musical on Twitter, or visit darrenclarkmusic.co.uk. Are you a writer, composer or artist who creates original work? Well, I want to hear from you. Please send any recordings that you have with full permission to use on the show, as we only play original work, to info@arian-productions.com, as we're passionate about supporting new work. And good luck to Rhys and Darren.
I'm Alistair Brammer, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats, a man with the hairdo of a children's TV presenter and the drinks cabinet of an elderly Broadway diva.
So when you finished Mountview, you obviously did an MA in musical theatre. What was your journey? Did you want to go into musical theatre? Did you just want to work within the business? What made you go from performer to agent?
I think it became very apparent to me very early on in my time at Mountview that musical theatre was not going to be my world. Having said that, I did pursue it because I loved to sing. I'd been doing it professionally since I was 11, and I loved to sing. And I used to sing my feelings. I think that's you have a
Great
concert,
release, isn't it?
Concert for yourself in your shower, belting out "Time Heals Everything," and all the drama. But I cannot dance a step.
Yeah.
And I there were choreographers I've worked with like Cressida and Philip Aiden, and Philip Aiden once said to me that he sees my name appear on a cast list, and he's just like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do with him?" And I remember, bless him. Well, bless him. We did Nonsense Amen.
Yeah.
At the Landor. I think we were the production that made the Landor go bust.
Just broke it.
We broke the Landor.
What was it? Bloody awful show, Dancing on Black Ice or something, where they tried to turn the Landor into a night. I mean, this all happened after I left, so
But Phil was the choreographer on Nonsense, and there was a 2-bar tap break. That was it. It was like 8 beats of tap. And God bless Phil, he spent an entire Saturday, like 5 hours, trying to teach me this 2-bar tap break. And eventually he said, "Do you know what? Would you mind just falling over?" So that's what I did. I just fell over. But yeah, it became apparent. And as I kind of continued in musical theatre, or trying to make it in musical theatre, it kind of dawned on me over a while that actually, in order to get, because I was always like, well, I'm a singer, I'm not a dancer, so I'll just play leads.
I'll just go into
I'll just play leads. It kind of dawned on me over a period of like 10 years that actually the way you get to play leads is by working your way up. And there was no kind of way that I was going to go in and get the opportunity to work my way up in a West End show, because and I don't mean you work your way up until you start as offstage swing and then graduate to onstage. I just mean you have to build a solid CV of professional, decent work before people kind of go, "Oh, let's see you for this third lead, second lead, first lead." You don't just kind of go, "Well, I can't dance, so I can only do leads." That's not how the industry works.
No.
But I kind of thought that is how the industry works.
Because I suppose that's what you taught from education.
The idea that I could bypass, being like a second cover or part of the ensemble and being a second cover, that I could bypass all of that just because I couldn't dance. It's baffling to me now that I thought that.
Well, but what's funny is you say that. I can think of plenty of people where that has been the case. But hey,
very true.
If we
naming no name,
if there was, it's an art, not a science.
But towards the end of it, I remember I was in auditioning for Memphis, of all things, and I'm a high baritone. These days I haven't sung a note since I became an agent. I literally haven't even sung in the shower. Maybe there's some deep-seated thing there that I need to work through.
You should do it tonight and let me know how you get on.
No, I don't think so. I think it's much more preferable for me to just go home and have another cigarette and not think about that. But at best, I'm a high baritone. And on a really good day, I could get a top B. I had worked for Pippa Ailion as a audition stage manager, a door boy. But every time I called myself a door boy, they'd say, "No, audition stage manager." So I worked for Pippa as an audition stage manager, and I knew Jim Arnold very well. And Jim had seen me in a couple of shows, and he said, I literally begged to be seen from Memphis. I was like, he's quirky and I'm quirky and weird, and I've got the top B, and so I worked on those auditions for a week, and these astonishing people were in, and my audition was at 5:45 on Friday, because they'd said, "We will see you last slot of the week, so that you don't have to then sit outside as the door boy and be thinking, what are they saying about me?"
That's good of them.
You do your audition and then you can go home. And it got to lunchtime on the Friday, and all of these astonishing voices had been in. Incredible week, incredible job. And I said it was Natalie Gallacher, who was the casting director on Memphis. And I said to Natalie over lunch on Friday, I said, "I'm not doing it." And she said, "Oh, come on, you've prepared for it all week. You might as well do it." And I was like, "No, that's not. I could maybe do it once, but these guys can do it 8 shows a week for a year. I'm fooling myself." And I went to Mark Malin as a singing teacher, and I said to him, "I want to know how to do that." And we had a couple of lessons, and he completely, in just 2 lessons, completely transformed my voice. It was astonishing. It was amazing. And then he said, to get where you want to be, it's going to be a lot of hard work, and it's going to be consistent lesson week after week after week, and putting the work in. And I just thought to myself, I think I'm 40. I've been doing this since I was 11. I can't begin retraining again now. I really can't. And it was such a relief to kind of go,
I was going to say,
I'm going to let that go now.
Because you're not saying that in a sad sort of...
Not at all.
And that was the end. And I think there is this strange thing that some performers have, this need to, I will show them, I will finally get there. And it does get to a point where you say, when did it stop becoming your art and your joy?
Yeah. When did it become about a destination and not about enjoying the journey?
Yeah.
And I wasn't enjoying the journey at that point. And no disrespect to anybody that I'd worked with, but I'd just done Edinburgh. And God, you know how exhausting Edinburgh is to do as a performer, let alone as a performer in their 40s, to kind of live that lifestyle and sleep on an air mattress in a room, like sharing with 3 other people and earning next to nothing. I was just like, this is not what I want to do with my life anymore.
No.
And no, there's no kind of, oh, I wish, if only. Because actually I always said I won't give up until I'm getting into the room. And the first 8 years of my career after leaving Mountview, I couldn't get near a West End casting room. And it was in the last 2 years that, I was in for Charlie and Wicked and various things. And I was getting into the room and I was kind of like, okay, I'm getting into the room. I'm not going to get any further. And I know that because working for Pippa was astonishing for me. It was so eye-opening because I could not only see the extraordinary talent that was coming up out of drama schools, but also I could hear how the voice had changed, not just since I started 30 years ago, but since I'd been at Mountview, like 10 years before. I could hear the change in the voice. And I was like, that's not my voice at all. And actually, I was so unhappy and so obsessed with the destination. And I promise you, anyone that's listening to this and is thinking, oh, no, but I want to get there. And I'm like, that's great, get there. But I promise you, it looks different when you arrive. And a lot of people get there and look around and go, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And it's, and I say this to anybody that's thinking of leaving or taking time away or anything. I'm like, do it. The industry's not going to shut down.
But also,
you can come back to it and it'll still be as fucking hard when you try and come back as it is right now.
But the phrase that isn't useful, and I suppose you and I are quite good examples of this. I mean, I never particularly had a desire to be an actor. My love is the rehearsal room. The thing I can't bear is the idea of doing it 8 times a week. Like, can't be asked. And the older I get, the more I'm delighted and more happier my knees and back are.
Yeah.
But the phrase that's used is giving up.
Yeah.
And it's not, well, change the narrative. Do you know what? I want more money and I want a new challenge. Yeah. It's a very different thing to tell yourself than I'm giving up on my dreams.
You get a new dream every night.
Yeah.
Exactly. And pursue that. Anything that, and I say to people ring me, clients ring me and they're like, oh, I've been offered this job teaching yoga in Bali. And I'm like, fuck off to Bali, for Christ's sake. You love teaching yoga. It's going to bring you in some money and it's Bali. What the hell are you doing? Fretting about whether you're going to get £100 a week job on the fringe.
And heaven forbid, you may fall in love. You may end up finding a house. Like
I'm obsessed with this idea of the forest and that people think that there's a path through the forest and that you have to stay on that path to get to where you want to go. To me, the much more interesting thing is to get off the fucking path and take a wander in that forest and find a glade of bluebells or a weird-shaped tree or a little pond.
Or a caterpillar.
And sit and chat and be with that for a while. Enjoy that journey, because if you're fucking focused on a destination, you're going to miss everything that's beautiful around you. You're going to miss your own life. And that's how I felt.
It's actually the entire story of The Wizard of Oz. Getting through Wonderland just to go back home.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing I find fascinating is just, is it about being in the theatre or is it about proving something? And for many people, I think it's probably both.
Yeah. There is a fear that they are letting people down in some way. And I think that's particularly apparent when you're thinking at 22, 23 that you want to leave, because your parents have generally supported you through years and years of dance class and piano lessons and singing lessons and driving you to your amateur shows and your speech competitions and things, and then they may well have supported you through drama school. And a lot of people say to me, it feels like I'm turning around and saying to my parents and kicking them in the face. I'm like, your parents, trust me, anybody who loves you just wants you to be happy.
Hello, this is Rufus Hound, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats. But the real question is, what are you doing while you're listening? Stop touching that, you filthy bastard.
It has now come to my favourite things.
Okay.
Josh Boyd-Rochford, I'm going to exile you in Whitley Bay on tour. I want to know what you need to survive in your digs. Now, you will get a copy of any religious text that you so wish, either to read or use as a doorstop. And you will also get the complete works of William Shakespeare. I'm going to ask you what you would need to survive, including your album, film, TV series, book, play, musical, and luxury item. Starting with, what album would you need with you?
Anything by Madonna.
Anything by Madonna.
Anything by Madonna.
The Immaculate Collection. It must be.
Probably, yeah.
And what would be the film? Anything with Madonna.
No. The film, do you know the film hasn't changed in decades? The film would be Dangerous Liaisons.
Oh, it's a wonderful film.
Yeah.
And this is because of Cassie Compton. I had to put in a TV box set. What would be the TV box set? Any series. You can stream it as much as you like.
Gilmore Girls. I've watched Gilmore Girls in its entirety 5 times straight through.
Now, I think this is going to be your hardest one because you are a real, proper bookworm. What would be the book?
Do you know, I think it would be Memoirs of a Geisha.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Yeah. And I've read it so many times and I still find things in it. And it's an old one and I've read better books, I think, since, but nothing that I come back to time and time and time again, and I can just lose myself in.
Old favourite.
Yeah.
I get all sorts of books on here, but if you haven't read it, listeners, it really is. Yeah, it's another world. It's a colourful other world. And what would be the play?
Amadeus.
Schaeffer.
Yeah. Could read that over and over and over again.
Capisco. What's that wonderful speech Salieri has? And what would be the musical?
The Wicker Husband.
The Wicker Husband. In every form that it's ever been.
Oh, God. And you'll know yourself because you work on new musicals. There are so many different forms. It's been a process.
Working on lots of new musicals at the moment. And I'm in that current stage of saying to writers, you know that wonderful song you spent 2 years writing? I don't think it's any good.
Murder Your Darlings.
Yeah. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm developing a musical with Dilly Keane at the moment, and that has gone through so many different sort of ideas and what are we going to do? We're at very early stages, but it's amazing to watch Dilly work.
This is your mad idea of doing a cookbook. Whose book was it?
Marianne Keyes.
That's it. And finally, what would be your luxury item?
It would be anything tech, I think. I love tech. I know what it would be. It would be the Oculus Go. Give me a virtual reality headset, please. And
just so you can be in a virtual island while sat on an island. just to be
exactly,
like, hashtag Irony.
Hi, this is Robert Duncan McNeil, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats.
When it is time for everyone's favourite part of the show. It is Funny 5 Minutes. Josh Boyd-Rochford, I'm going to ask you some of the most inappropriate, outrageous questions that you will have ever been asked, certainly on a podcast, within 5 minutes.
Okay.
You must answer as many of these questions as quickly and as honestly as you can. However, you are allowed 3 passes, but use them wisely because you just never know what I might ask.
Oh, God.
Josh Boyd-Rochford, let's play Funny 5 Minutes. Are you an early riser or a night owl?
Early riser.
What is the most delicious thing you can cook?
Jambalaya.
Jambalaya? Like proper jambalaya?
Veggie jambalaya.
And of course, no seafood. Do you have a teddy bear?
Yes.
What's his name?
Timmy.
I thought you were going to say Reese. Who is the best Doctor Who?
Matt Smith.
That's a very good answer. Is line dancing cool?
Yes.
What was the best kids' TV show?
Why don't you?
Do you believe in ghosts?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a ghost?
Yes.
Pause there. What happened?
Oh no, you didn't say there was going to be pause.
There are special things within this challenge.
I've seen a few ghosts in my time.
Go on.
Well, this is going to sound really funny. We had a ghost cat at Bristol.
Are you kidding me?
No.
This is the second ghost cat that's been brought up on the show.
We had a
People
ghost
podcast.
cat in our flat in Bristol, in Queen's Road, Queen's Court, Queen's Road. We had a ghost cat, and everyone that came to the flat saw it. And in that kind of casual way of like, we'd be sat having dinner or smoking in the living room or something, and people would go, "Where's the cat?" And I'd be like, "We don't have a cat." And people are like, "I just saw a cat in your hallway." And we're like, "Oh yeah, we see her every so often. Ghost cat."
Redeeming the show. What is your favourite word?
Fuck.
Have you ever pissed yourself on stage?
No, but I've fallen off the stage drunk.
Excellent. Not really a surprise based on the
Not
stories that
really a
we've
surprise, is it?
The most important question of the show. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
One horse-sized duck.
And the reason for that?
Because it's only one of them.
I mean, but we are talking...
Horse-sized duck. And ducks, I do find ducks quite scary.
They are a frightening thing. Go with a massive duck?
I'd go with the massive duck.
Sweet or savoury?
Sweet.
Who was your teenage crush?
The boys from Bros.
No, you're showing his age.
Oh, Lord.
What are the best kind of pants?
Jockstrap.
Yes. Hang on. Who is the most famous person you've ever met?
The most famous?
Mm-hmm. Is that a pass?
Lionel Richie.
Lionel Richie. Would you ever like to swim with sharks?
No.
Very wise. Would you, if you were to have an autobiography, what would it be called?
I'm still here.
Who would play you in a movie of your life?
Oh gosh, I know exactly. Rory Kinnear.
Rory Kinnear. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Oh, wrong answer. Where is your favourite theatre?
It's got to be the Coliseum for me. It's where I grew up.
What is your most annoying habit?
I'm always right.
What is the worst note that's ever been given to you by a director?
I don't think you're acting that fat enough.
Really? I'm not even going to answer that. What is the most expensive thing you've ever bought?
Tech. I spend a fortune on tech that I then don't use.
Or a pub.
Or a pub. Or a house that I then sell.
If someone could narrate your entire life, who would it be?
Meryl.
I thought you were going to say Sue Pollard.
Actually, Sue Pollard could well be in that category of the most famous person I've ever met.
If you could jump into a swimming pool filled with something, what would it be?
Jelly.
I thought you were going to say men. Have you ever been abducted by aliens?
No. I want to be, though. So if there are any overhead and listening, I'd love it.
It's all about the anal probe. Andrew Lloyd Webber or Stephen Sondheim?
Sondheim.
Who is the most beautiful person you've ever kissed?
Reese.
Oh, hang on a second. I'm going to give you one of these. Well, sadly, that noise tells me that is the end of the show. And boy, have I got a lot of editing to do. But before we go, first of all, thank you to Darren Clark and the wonderful Rhys Jennings for sending in their songs from The Wicker Husband. Well done to everyone who made it into my August theatrical tips. But ladies and gentlemen, please go mad for the one, the only, Mr. Josh Boyd-Rochford! Thank you so much for coming on the show, mate.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I've been on a journey.
You really do.
Yeah.
I'm going to invoice you for therapy at the end of it. First of all, for everyone who's listening to the show, how can people keep up to date with everything that you're up to?
On my website, or subscribe to the Weekly Digest, or follow me on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter.
What's your handle?
JBR Agent.
Everything discussed in today's episode will be in the show notes, so do check it out, especially for links to Josh's free mailing list for actors. It's really, really brilliant. I love it. You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew Keats, follow the show at ShowPeopleUK, and don't forget, use hashtag ShowPeoplePodcast. You can send me an email to info@arian-productions.com or like the Show People Facebook page at facebook.com/ShowPeoplePodcast. Join in the discussion with other listeners and find out about everything else that we're up to. This podcast is produced by Arian Productions Limited, dedicated to giving opportunities to theatre makers. Now, if you enjoyed the show, please just take 2 minutes to leave us a little review on iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. That really helps us out. If you'd like to continue to receive this free fortnightly podcast, and if you want to see me do more things like masterclasses, productions, and other free resources, well, visit our brand new GoFundMe page at gofundme.com/support-Arian-productions, and please give to our enormous fundraising campaign. We're trying to raise £50,000 to do more productions in 2019. Add your name to the list. Please be one of our great, big, fabulous supporters. Finally, if you want to get yourself a Show People podcast mug and pen, just go to arian-productions.com/shop. Congratulations to everyone mentioned in today's show. And until next time, Show People, just be better.
Do you know what? I don't think I've ever told you this.
Go on.
No, it's not you at all. It's Tom Sutherland.
Oh, you can't.
Just cut all of that.
We might end up in the blooper at the end. Thanks very much.